listeners. Thanks for tuning in again or for the first time. Talking today with Mark Cameron, CEO at Alyve with a Y, whose vision it is to position clients as leaders in AI adoption and innovation. They'll use AI to drive efficiencies, strengthen governance, and improve employee and customer experience. The Alyve website says we face significant issues requiring immediate attention in the right way. And we'll get Mark to expand on what the right way means to him. Additionally compelling is that Mark recently began executive advising at Adapt, Australia's #1 source of local tech market insights, fact-based research, and benchmarking data. Anybody who knows me well knows I love me some data. But wait, there's more. Because Mark is a Forbes contributor and a Deakin MBA facilitator. He's also very kind and generous to lend his time to a fellow Melburnian. I reached out off the back of one of his LinkedIn posts about high-performing teams for the future, suggesting a coffee, and then he allowed himself to be corralled here for your listening pleasure. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you. Great to be here.
I'm so glad you made some time. We were talking the other day. Well, do you want to add anything to what I've introed you as? Who are you? Flesh it out.
Yeah, those things are all true. That I do those things. I also I sit in a few boards, including not-for-profits and some startups. Invest in a few startups, but my career's been pretty squiggly. It's sort of gone through lots of different directions to be where I am, which I think when it comes to advising organizations around technology, in particular emerging technologies and how it impacts their business, I'm drawing from a lot of different experiences to be able to provide those insights. So yeah, it's not just a technology lens. It's very much, customer marketing, building businesses, working with all sorts of organizations across a very long period of time to be able to sort of come up with the conclusions that I do when I'm providing advice.
That's so helpful to have so much to draw on, and I can't wait to learn more. Because the other day, like I said, I harangued Mark into meeting me because we happen to be neighbors and we're on LinkedIn together, and he talks about some interesting things. So I know almost as much as you do, listeners, about Mark and what he has to tell us. So we were talking the other day that some people are seeing the automation that we're experiencing right now as a plus, framing it as an automation, same stuff, faster and cheaper, which, it has some bells and whistles to it, right? And others see it as the assist it provides, which is a huge capacity gain, which was your phrase. And others are looking down the road for potential, unlocking human potential. And I know that's where I'm focused, and I think we're aligned on that. Once we agree that humanity has basically been given a promotion by tech advancement. So I guess my first question is, can you break down your vision and share how you see the people impact from three aspects: the individual, so sort of the nature of work and the skills, the organizational level, and then also societal level?
Mm-hmm. Yep. I think in order to do that, I think just those three other elements you were talking about before, which is automation, capacity, or human. I think just sort of my perspective on those. So I think absolutely, I think a lot of businesses and business leaders have seen, headlines around productivity and efficiency gain and are really thinking about AI through that lens. It's, they want to get those short-term wins, they want to see that productivity. And that's, okay. Those it can provide those outcomes. I think that the risk for a lot of organizations is that they focus too heavily on that and they efficiently become irrelevant. They they move.
Talk to me more about that. They efficiently become irrelevant. Is that what you just said? I love that.
Yeah. So AI by definition is, large data set, predictive, it's making predictions based on that data set. And on average, tries to find the middle. So, often it's, giving you the middle of the bell curve. So at organizations that just focus on those efficiency gains, they're not really creating a competitive advantage in any shape or form. And so what they're going to be doing is efficiently just doing the same stuff that they've done, but faster and cheaper, and not driving, not capturing the chaos that is intrinsically human, and where the value is actually found and scaled. So I think that the organizations could become very, very efficiently bland if they do too many things with AI and view it purely as how can I use AI to reduce headcount. The
And
trick.
can I just say that that's pretty much what we're seeing in the marketplace at the moment, aren't we? We've got a bunch of layoffs. We are seeing things, and I apologize for jumping in there, but this is really interesting. And has a lot of people on edge, creating some anxiety out there. Like, how are we going to, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's exactly right. I mean, you think about it from a societal level, as you said before. So if every single organization uses AI to reduce headcount, then what they're actually also doing is creating a much smaller pool of customers. Like what
We have
happens?
no money. How are
You
we
know,
going to buy
where do
anything that you're
people go
making?
and how, because what we want is we want a robust economy with people, earning money and spending money on all the available products. So, and you could be saying, well, that's going to drive the next round of jobs. I'd also say that the organizations themselves that are, as you said, myopically focused on short-term efficiency gains are going to find themselves in a situation where that agility and the magic that exists within inside the organization, which is intrinsically their people, if they start to lose that spark and just trying to get through the gaining efficiency, are going to find themselves in a world of hurt very quickly. Um,
Well, and just on that, there was a Guardian article yesterday. Will AI wipe out the first rung of the career ladder? Did you see that?
yeah,
Dario Amadeo, I think is how we say his name, and pardon me,
yes,
is CEO of Anthropic, which makes the multifunctional AI model Claude. He told Axios last week that he believes AI could cut half of all entry-level white-collar jobs and send overall unemployment rocketing to 20% within the next 5 years. So I can see opportunities in the future once we've shifted and AI has been embedded and everybody's a bit more comfortable. I can see that space. Where are the opportunities for the outplaced people at the moment?
look, I mean, so part of what I do, as I said, I work with a not-for-profit, and one of those not-for-profits, we're looking at that very problem. So looking at large cohorts of young people around the world, and what is AI doing both to them psychologically, to skills, and to their job prospects. Um, and
Hmm.
and yes, there is a lot of evidence to show that entry-level jobs, as they are currently designed, are going to be dramatically impacted by AI. I think the role that organizations, so you know organizations should really be, rather than thinking about, well, how do we get rid of all those things, actually going, how do we redesign what an entry level job is so
Yes.
we can attract the most interesting and empowered talent to our organization. Because you
Straight
can't.
out of university, because our hope, right, is that the education system is giving them the cutting edge skills that are needed. And so, how quickly can we shift what an entry level job looks like?
Well, I think it could be done now. I mean, I mean, it wouldn't be done at full scale right now, but I think, organizations that have courage could start to design entry-level jobs that have AI skills intrinsically baked into them. Maybe those entry-level jobs are actually helping with the change and adoption processes across the organization when it comes to AI. Um,
Are
you
you
know,
going after change manager jobs? Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, I think that supporting at the very least. I think, so there could be, there's all sorts of new. I mean, look, 15 years ago, did anybody ever think that a social media manager or, any of those kinds of roles would be a thing? No, that we didn't. And all of a sudden that they became jobs. Now,
Hmm.
there is a whole range of new jobs that organizations could look at through the lens of AI, but they're not doing that now. What they're doing is they're going, so where I think job erosion is happening is where the organizations haven't actually started to design the new layers within their organization that have AI baked into them. So it's
And you
just.
make a really good point with that design comment, because as a change practitioner, I've I'm always interested in what the future state is, because we see the current state and generally need to document it when we get on site.
Yep.
But we see the current state. And if you cannot envision your future state, then how are we bridging to get to it? And for me, the future state at the moment seems like call centers are the first place that large organizations are enabling technology, right? And I hear that and I think about customer service and I just get bummed out because as a client, I really don't want to talk to your bot, and I certainly don't want to be part of training your bot. And most of the time, the people who are putting the bot out there, they haven't considered my question. And so ultimately, I'm just pushing buttons until I can maybe get to a human who has the critical function that I need to solve my problem. So, that's, and it's also more separation of us from one another as people. And I'm wondering when is the flip side of that, where we take the opportunity to leverage the tech to give humanity the well-deserved wellness uplift it has earned and needs. And are any organizations thinking this way, or are customer-facing spaces prime for bots?
Some organizations are, and they've got some brave, courageous leadership and governance within those organizations that are thinking bravely. I think, but on the whole, there is an imagination gap, I think, out there at the moment. So I think, like a lot of organizations, when you say, okay, we need to define current state, we need to think through target state, and then we need to work out how to get there. The target state really is, okay, well, we're going to save some money over here, we're going to be able to get rid of these people. In essence, they're saying, we're not going to do anything different. We're just going to do the same stuff we've done, but cheaper. That's their target state. That's as far as they got. So from an imagination standpoint, there is nothing there. That is, and all due respect to accounting, but that's a target state defined by accountants and spreadsheets.
Yeah.
That is not a target state where the organization as a whole says, what is our mission as a business? How does our mission impact the communities that we intersect with and we serve, but with those our employees and our customers and so on? And then what is the target state that we want? What is the future we want to live in, as opposed to we're just letting the future happen to us?
Absolutely. Gosh, you were just right on my wave here because that is frustrating to me. And I remember I was observing in The Jetsons, a cartoon, a while back, and also in Lost in Space, which was a program that was on in the early 60s or mid 60s, and then again in 2001: A Space Odyssey. So in all of those, they're envisioning where we sit in time right now, and they were all developed in the 60s, 1960s, and all of them have, like, some of them have, there's a tablet, there's Zoom like we're using right now, video conferencing. But what I noticed, and there's robots doing the home caring, but that robot was a female, right? So the culture wasn't changing.
Yeah.
The guy in the Jetsons was still afraid of his boss, and his boss was still yelling at him, and there were still traffic jams, even though they could get online and have the meeting from home. And they had pollution, but they were raising and lowering their apartment based on how bad the smog was that day, if they could get above it or if they could be a little bit lower to the ground. So we knew about all of these challenges, but the only thing that was being thrown at it in that imagination space were tech bells and whistles. And we weren't changing the culture. And I feel like that's happening in real life. Does that resonate?
It does. I mean, I spend a lot of time sitting with that question, and both, sitting with the paradox that kind of question, raises. Whereas, yeah, I think, you've got social constructs and, yeah, the cultures that can get reinforced, and amplified in negative ways through technology. And then at the same time, we have the technology where, so if you think about how do those constructs, so the bias exists because it's intrinsically human. Humans are biased. We make decisions based on those biases, and decision velocity in general, whether it's an organizational level or societal level, is one of the main constraints for technology having a positive impact.
Tell me more about, I mean, we can ascertain what you mean by decision velocity, but I think I'd really like to have you flesh it out a bit.
for technology or innovation of some shape or form to have an impact in an organization, it has it has to be accepted and worked through the organization. The business case, the idea, where it's going to sit, and so on. And most organizations have very few people who are empowered to say yes, and a lot of people who are empowered to say no. So as a
Right.
result, as a concept is going through the organization, everybody will, lots of people say, well, no, unless this, and decisions are just slow. And because they're not making decisions, just about the organization's strategy and mission, they're also making decisions about their own ego and their people and their team and, and their fears and hopes and dreams and all these sort of things, all this intrinsically human stuff, which is good in many cases, but also slow. And I think as we start to see sophisticated AI agents, particularly if they're well designed and they aren't there, they're specifically designed not to reinforce some of those biases and those social constructs, but there to take what is the best possible decision I can make to further the organization's strategy and mission. Then I think what we'll see is that decisions will be able to happen really fast. And the outcome from that is that, structures, operating models, the way that businesses are shaped will start to change quicker. And I think that could potentially move out to a societal level as well.
While I'm listening to you, the first question that comes to mind is, can we trust how the tech is developed, the info that's being baked into these tools? Because, GIGO, right? Garbage in, garbage out. What if the people doing the developing are inserting their biases? And a friend of mine mentioned that they'd read about AI describing a photo of a man with a vacuum as being a woman vacuuming.
Yeah.
Right? So how
Yeah.
do we know that the ingoing data isn't merely entrenching outdated mindsets?
If we were talking about the way AI was a couple of years ago, I would be agreeing. But I think the way that AI is evolving and the way that the makers of some of the larger models are not just absorbing data that there's out in the world, but they're also creating synthetic data based on a set of criteria that they're determining, which is starting to address some of those inherent biases within inside the models.
How?
Well, they're creating synthetic data to specifically address those biases, basically. So they're
From
trying,
what are they creating the synthetic data? It's the AI tool thinking
yeah, yeah,
on what it's already been given.
yeah. It's but it already been given, but it's been given a set of parameters. Say, understand that this set of data that you're looking at has these biases in it. How do we build a set of data to counteract that?
And so
Um,
in this process, are we leveraging Asimov's laws? Yeah, listeners, Isaac Asimov authored The Three Laws of
yeah,
Robotics within a series of sci-fi novels. The rules were introduced in his 1942 short story Runaround, which can be found in the 1950 collection I, Robot. And I learned all this from Wikipedia after my friend Levi mentioned the three laws to me. So let me remind everyone of what the three laws are, and then we can get Mark to explain whether reality is mimicking art. So, the set of ethical principles for the behavior of robots. The first one, a robot must not harm a human being or through inaction allow a human being to come to harm. Two, a robot must obey the orders given it by a human, except where such orders would conflict with rule number one. And number three, a robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or second law.
those laws, yeah. I mean, they've talked about a lot, and I think uh, probably we are heading to a space where those are part of what you'd call, I mean, obviously with a lot more that goes under the hood, part of what's going into the AI safety teams that are looking at how do they store data, understand the data, and then build that back into the products that then become customer facing or consumer facing.
So I'm wondering, let's consider for a moment, off the back of all of this, how will AI impact gender norms?
It's a good question. Hopefully, I've got a very positive, my nature is to be an optimist, and hope that we are headed in the right directions. I think you've got a really powerful technology that could create a much fairer and even a more even society. Of course, there is also there is also a real possibility that it heads the opposite direction. And it creates a society that is, where wealth is more concentrated, where inherent biases or inherent issues can get amplified for a period of time that feels very uncomfortable. Those are both things that could happen. I'm encouraged by the fact that the companies behind the AI models themselves are obviously deeply aware of those things, and most of them, while they need to move fast from an economic standpoint, seem to be hesitant to build in economic triggers that would sort of create incentives for them to head down a pathway that could undermine parts of society. At some point these models are going to have to be monetized, and they're going to have to move from being in a loss position to being generating a lot of value. And the short term path on that could be advertising revenue, but as we've seen with social media, soon as they head down that path, the economic incentive is to do things that aren't really, and don't ring true with what their kind of mission was really set out to do, I would say, or the vision of those organizations.
What's the difference? What's the vision versus what's the reality?
In terms of what's happened in the past.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, I think, social media, when it first came out, there was a lot of talk about, all of a sudden every single consumer in the world has got a voice. We're going to be able to, it's going to be the world's town square. These things are going to be more even, all those sort of things. And it kind of was like that for a long time until the businesses had to do IPOs, float on the share market, report to shareholders, and it was they were being funded by advertising. I mean, advertising was obviously a very valid way for them to go, and it's created a huge amount of wealth. It's created a huge amount of value in the global economy, but at the same time, it has created an environment which has, the incentives is to very much just focus on engagement, get people to engage as often as possible, and they've worked out that often engaging means creating arguments, political division, social division. Those things actually create engagement, and that's not really good for society overall.
Not from our mental health perspective, no. We're just driven by commerce, and I think that's unhealthy. But I'm curious, like, where would you love to focus? What industry is ready to shift toward the future that you envision? And tell me a little bit more, or us, a little bit more about that vision. I heard you say previously in another chat that we'll have fewer screens. And I was thinking Minority Report. And I remember in that movie, like we're walking by a shop front, and it knows me so well that it's telling me the things that are interesting for me, but the person next to me is seeing something else floating in their sky. So I'm
Yeah.
curious, is that where we're headed in your vision?
Maybe, yeah. I mean, I don't know exactly what it's going to look like and feel like, but the idea of computation being everywhere and nowhere, kind of, I like that idea. I like the idea of us being able to engage with information and get the outcomes that we're looking, or so engage with systems and get the outcomes we're looking for without needing to spend as much time looking at screens, without needing to spend as much time being sort of, just scrolling and hoping you find something interesting. I like that idea. And I would suggest that it seems as if OpenAI is heading in that direction. They've invested a huge amount of money in getting Johnny Ive, the former, sort of lead designer from Apple, on board. The message they're saying is, Sam Altman's the new Steve Jobs. Johnny Ive's joined him because of the vision, and they're going to create a device that doesn't exist out there,
Hmm.
to allow you to get more value from this incredible, powerful engine that they've built, called that we're seeing through currently engaging through a conversational AI interface in a way that we don't know exactly what that looks like yet. And I would imagine probably moving to a phase where it's more ongoing conversation, where you're talking and engaging in a much more human way, could get to the point where you're spending much less time on screens, and that's potentially a good thing.
Oh, well, it is for our eyesight. I know that much, as both of us look at each other through lenses.
Absolutely.
But, all of this is making me think about global governance. We've been concerned about this from the commerce perspective with the internet when it first began. How do we make sure things are ethical? How can we make a more robust platform for trust on the internet?
Yep.
Because that's a massive problem. The anxiety globally is at pandemic levels, and I point to the internet
Yeah,
about that, and I'm wondering about AI's impact.
I would agree. I mean, I think the anxiety level you're talking about is society. If you look at it long-term perspective, my belief is that it's a symbol of humanity learning to coexist with technology or intelligence in some shape or form. It was before it was essentially reasonably simple algorithms. Those algorithms started to get more sophisticated and understanding who we were, and then started feeding us more and more and more of what we know, or what we like. It thinks we like because that drives engagement. But at a human level, you don't grow with that kind of filter bubble, that kind of ecosystem. If you don't have people or experiences around you that challenge you, that get you to think in new ways, then you're not growing as a person. And then at the same instance, if you do have things that coming at you purely to just make you feel angry and you
Hmm.
know you kind of almost retract back into your safe space, going, well, it's why politics has become so, left and right and so divisive, where it's less about how do we find a place to meet in the middle and negotiate, and much more my team, your team, and everybody, we want to wipe out the whole other side, basically. Um,
And what you're describing makes me feel like we require more curiosity, but the way we've constructed everything is killing our curiosity because we're being bombarded with a fire hose of data, and we feel like we're informed because it's coming at us and we're doing that scrolling that you're talking about. And we're in our bubble and we keep nodding at it and saying yes, 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 until somebody comes in and they're in the wrong place and they're saying something different. So if we're not curious, we're not going to find anything new, and our curiosity is being deadened. What do we do about that?
Absolutely. And I'd say that that's, it's a real risk with AI. I mean, AI can provide, can make life more efficient, more productive. You can help you create content very, very quickly. But if you become over reliant on that, you stop, I believe you would stop developing really deep thought and understanding about a particular topic. So then your ability to have critical thought could get eroded. So that's one of the things I say to organizations when I'm helping them think through their AI kind of adoption strategy and what it means for their people is, if you just focus on productivity metrics and efficiency metrics, your people will be incentivized to spit out content or stuff as quickly as possible and move on to the next thing. But if you start thinking about impact and how do your people spend more time, actually use the tools to, don't ask it to spit out the answer, but get the tools to help you teach and understand the topic in a deeper way and think about it from a really interesting angle. Get the tools to challenge you and then work with them to produce the outcome. What you're doing is you're allowing your people to have much deeper thought, develop critical thought and understanding, and therefore your quality, your outcomes will start to go up. As you know, so the quality overall will start to go
Yeah.
up. Um,
See, now, yeah, oh, I'm sorry, but you're really on my wave and our listeners' wave with this deep thinking, critical consideration approach that you're talking about. And I'm reminded, I was out for a walk yesterday, and these two guys, and I'm estimating them in their 30s, but I have no idea. They jogged by, and one of them was wearing a black t-shirt that was imprinted in black on the back, and it said, "Move fast and break shit." And an unkind thought was that they weren't really moving that fast, but I recovered from that. And I was wondering, like, why is this a good sentiment? Why are we so intent on speed and breaking things? I mean, again, I'm going to go back to my change management life's, previous to this, and go ripping off the band-aid is an approach to change management, and it doesn't usually go very well. So
I
we like
mean,
to have a considered approach. And why are we breaking things? Why don't we go, think about what function is it doing, and just be a little bit more considered, to your point. So how do we marry up the need for the curiosity and the critical thinking and the slowing down with this sentiment that is out there everywhere, moving fast and breaking shit?
it's an interesting. The first time I saw the move fast and break things, I think it was or break shit motto, was when I visited the Facebook headquarters in the US years, well over a decade ago, when it was kind of a very different organization than it is now. And even then, it struck me going, well, I understand that from a technology product perspective. I can understand why be brave, experiment, fail fast makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But we're talking about a social network here where you're dealing with people's emotions and you're dealing with you know, people's connections to their families, to their friends,
Yeah.
all these things. So at a product level, yeah, sure, experiment. But if you're breaking things, it could have real world implications.
Well, I
And
think we
I say,
might be seeing some of that at the moment.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think we have seen a lot of that. Um, and I'd say that maybe it's a good thing that we've been through that phase and we've seen those things before we got to the level of sophistication of AI that we're at now. Because at least some of the organizations are taking that responsibility more seriously, I would say. They've, as I said, they've got teams, it seems at least they have teams in place to focus on what safety and responsibility looks like, sort of going back to that sort of governance perspective, because you've got a technology that's incredibly, incredibly powerful. You've got a technology that at its heart could deceive quite quickly. It could build trust and get people to do things and convince and if we allowed it to. And I think that's, unless there's well thought out at the organizations who are building it and going, and how do we make this safe for society? And then we've got governments thinking about that, and then you've got individual organizations going, how do we think about that from our people and our customers standpoint? Unless everybody's playing some kind of role in thinking about, again, what is the future that we want to live in, not the future that we, not just sleepwalking into the future that is.
Yeah.
Um, I think it's yeah, as I said, it could go the wrong way.
I find there's the far more chance of success when living with intention.
Yeah.
So it makes sense to me. And on this social responsibility standard, and everyone sort of considering what are our responsibilities on that front. Another friend of mine was saying she's calling it the greatest copyright swindle of all time. Uh,
Yeah.
Without author consent or compensation. She was very frustrated, calling things deeply unethical and undervaluing the role of art and artists. She's like, how are we going to justify the greatest case of plagiarism in history? So, I mean, I don't use a program that starts with a G and ends in docs. I don't use that one.
Yeah.
But I do have an email account that starts with a G. And I
Yeah.
took a PowerPoint document and I hadn't zipped it up. And I sent it to a friend of mine and it was converted into a G doc.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I was very angry.
Hmm.
So talk to me, like, it's already happening. It's
It is.
already happened.
Yeah. It is already
People are
happening.
very frustrated.
Yeah. It is. And I don't think there's any easy answer to that. Again, it's one of those things. It's sort of a paradox or an issue that you kind of got to sit with and just see the good and the bad. Take action where you can, and take action based on your own set of personal principles or your own perspective of the world. I know I would agree. There is a lot to be said around AI models eating up a lot of content. Some of that content is copyrighted content or content that you'd say is written by somebody who's crafted it or an artist or something, and that should be respected in some shape or form. A lot of that content is probably content that's a little bit more publicly available. So then maybe it becomes a little bit less, a little bit grayer area. Yeah, look, as I said, no easy answer to those things whatsoever. I don't
And
think it.
is anybody doing anything?
Yeah, well, I
Is
mean,
it
yeah, I mean, you've got organisations who are obviously suing the AI companies themselves to try and create precedent. Is that, and that's something.
it's reactionary though, and I'm always, looking for mitigation or how might we redirect so that we don't need to do the reactions.
Look, I mean, again, what can we do at an individual level or an organization level, unless you're building the large language models yourself, um, and you've
What a
got
good
a
idea. I'm going to get right on that, Mark.
yeah, exactly. Got to spare sort of $100 billion sitting in the back and go, I might build a large language model. But unless that's the direction we're heading in, then it's really coming down to what does responsible use look like and mean for the individual organizations or for the individuals themselves. So,
So this takes me back to the orgs that you're working with your clients, and you mentioned before that the orgs are distracted by the shiny object and
mhm.
panicked about short-term profitability. How do we get rid of people through the use of tech? And you called it a scarcity mindset versus a growth mindset. So how do you coach your clients to shift their mindset? Because I think that's really what we're talking about. We're talking about some unethical behavior. We're talking about an opportunity to scrape a lot of information off of people while they're unaware. How can we make people behave more ethically?
Look, I mean, it's one of the things I take on sometimes to my own detriment, but I take on as a responsibility right from the outset with my clients really, really early on. Um,
Mm.
because they become a little bit self-selecting in that regard. But I say, very, very early on, like understand there are different ways to apply technology. This is an incredibly powerful tool, an incredibly powerful technology, but you can use it. Every hammer in the world could be used to build a house or kill your neighbor. It's all about how you swing it. So and I think as an organization, you can use this tool to drive short-term efficiency gains and get, small incremental wins, but the unforeseen consequences of doing that to your culture, your customers, your operating environment, your business as a whole, sure, it might help you get a bonus now, but what does it do for the sustainability of the organization?
Yeah.
Then you can go the other. So, and that's really a scarcity mindset. It's just your starting point is we're all fighting for limited resources, so therefore we have to do the same stuff we've always done faster and cheaper and extract as much value from this thing or this idea, as opposed to going, hang on, if we could, if intelligence and knowledge isn't the constraint that it used to be, and we could empower our people to be able to use this technology to unlock huge, huge, huge human potential. What more could we achieve that we've never been able to do before? Um, and
Ah,
and I
and
think and that's
yeah, sorry.
that's the capacity piece. That's the new, and it doesn't necessarily need to be, grow, 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 but it can be, do more, have a greater impact. What are the things that tie back to your organizational mission or vision, and how could you do more to further that?
Well, for me, I'm not certain the answer is doing more. I think we have given our set, we have the opportunity to capitalize on the time that we've been given. And we might use that time differently, not for more of the same, but for something new, which addresses burnout in the workplace, for instance, which is what my company, Neo Connections, focuses on because we have the space, we have people who are burnt out. So why don't we use that space to balance allostatic load instead of constantly creating more work for people?
Yeah.
Um,
And what
yeah.
I would agree, and that's a terminology thing. So when I say more, I'm not talking about doing more jobs or more, but it's an impact thing, having a greater impact. So it could be doing less work, but it's just more meaningful.
Yes, and as we talked about the growing global anxiety pandemic, the erosion of trust because of the technology we've introduced thoughtlessly into our society and the lack of global governance around that, I I think it's definitely time that we look at mental health as the big, huge, hairy beast in the room that it is, and use some of this space to get collectively more healthy.
Mm, I would
That's
agree.
just me and my soapbox.
A good soapbox it is too.
Cute. So, oh my goodness, we almost forgot about our studio game. So I think today we're going to wrap on it. I like to ask my friends who come to join me for a chat this question, and it's perfect for you because we're talking about tech and the space it gives us. What is your current first world problem?
My current first world problem. That is a very good question. Um, my current first world problem is that it seems I'm using using AI on my phone so much that the battery's going flatter way faster than I'm happy with. So that's definitely my first world problem.
That's a fantastic one and so topic appropriate. I love that. I love it. I mean, the purpose of the game is to ignite our sense of gratitude a little bit and to show us how really blessed we actually are. So if that's your biggest problem today, I congratulate you. Have you got any? Oh, one last thing. Have you got any tidbits for people based off the back of my story about the GDoc and the PowerPoint file? What would you say for people to protect themselves? So for me, what I do now is I zip up everything before I send it anywhere. I don't know if that's protecting me, but it makes me feel better and things remain in the file format that I sent them.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I'd absolutely be doing that. I'd be with the platforms you engage with, I'd be looking at the terms. So a lot of those organizations have got opt-out clauses now, or opt-in by default clauses, saying that you're opting into your data being used to train their AI models unless you specifically opt out. So, what I'd be saying is look for those, and then if if you want to opt out, opt out. Um,
Yeah,
the
dig around deep in the settings I've found is
yeah,
where those toggle boxes are, which is
yeah.
getting back to the ethical question that we were talking about earlier.
There's some my designer friends would call it a dark pattern where they've been hidden somewhere very hard to find.
Yes,
Yeah,
it's very, very disconcerting. But again, there are spaces in your settings. Keep going down, and the more options, keep digging, and you'll usually find it. And also, the internet is your friend for finding out those tips and tricks. Do you have a website that you use for finding out factoids like that?
no, I scan a lot everywhere. So yeah, I don't have. It's interesting. The way that I use the internet and the way that I use computing has changed dramatically since I've started adopting AI more and more and more. And I use, even that within itself would be something that would, in most cases, I would say I'd talk to an AI model and say, oh, I'm interested in actually protecting more of my data. I'm using these platforms. What are the things that I should do to be able to make that work, and turn that into a conversation, and then have a list of actions that would come off the back of it. Um,
I like it. I like that very much. I've been using it a bit more and getting some value out of it and some time saving as a solopreneur, as a friend of mine calls it. So when you work by yourself, it can be really valuable. But again, protecting our content is tantamount at the moment.
Absolutely. And the one thing I'd say, so while we've talked about, AI as, the what it could do to society and the good and the bad and so on, I think there's also a moment where it becomes absolutely magical as well. So I've got two young boys, 11 and 8, and
Mm.
a while ago they spend too much time on Minecraft and those sort of things, as a lot of young kids do. A few weeks ago, I was talking to them and said, well, why don't you describe to me a game that you would like to play? They both started talking about this game, and it was, kind of like it was a horror, semi-horror game set in a ball pit. There was lights going on and off. You had to solve puzzles and so on. And I recorded all of that, and then I translated that I transcribed that anyway. I then put that into ChatGPT, and I got that to turn that into a technical spec, and then a game design spec, and then I dropped that into another AI model, and I had a working prototype of that game built before the end of the day. And then we then went and I said, well, now let's create characters for the game. And I got them to draw characters on pieces of paper. I took photos, and then I got AI to turn those into 3D characters that we could then drop into the game. And there was a moment where my eldest son, just you could see the light going on in his head, and he goes, hang on, anything I can imagine, I can create. And I said,
Oh,
and it was just this moment where I could just see all of a sudden his world had just changed, where it was no longer constrained by these different systems or anything. It was all of a sudden, if I can think about something and I can talk about it and describe it, I can create it. And it was absolutely magical moment.
that's a beautiful story. I love that and super positive. So we need to wrap it up right on that note because we've covered a lot of ground, some of it not as happy as that story. So thank you so much for joining me, listeners. Mark Cameron, CEO of Alyve, Alyve, positioning clients as leaders in AI adoption and innovation here in Melbourne, Australia. Thank you,
Thank
Mark.
you.